I want to read the notes that Sobish provided in 2.8. When all causes and conditions are assembled in dependent origination, the result of practice will be accomplished now, as in the case of the Drigompa. The Drigompa here refers to Kiba Rinpoche. This must refer to the great poverty and many obstacles and setbacks in Jigten Sumgön's life. Jigten Sumgön's life was, not an easy one. And I have said, quite a few times, we all need to be reminded again and again and again. I for sure needs to be reminded myself again and again and again and again. All the great masters of the past had difficult lives. If that was a prerequisite, then most of us will not be able to achieve their greatness. Now, the attitude towards that should not be that difficulties themselves necessarily have some kind of magical blessing. Then we would be falling into the extreme of asceticism, thinking that by torturing ourselves, some magical result will come. But it is good to recognize that, whether they practice so hard and therefore seems really difficult to us, or more to the point, somehow in their case, they kept meeting, challenges. And then they kept overcoming challenges. And they became great that way. One thing I might say is that I think in some ways, this is maybe will sound controversial, but I really think in some ways, when the system of tukus in Tibetan Buddhism became like strong, like Our Holiness said, for hundreds of years in Tibetan Buddhism, there's no tuku system. Tuku, the idea, like a great master comes back, reborn again, continue the work. The idea is present in all Mahayana Buddhism, that bodhisattvas manifest in the world, Buddhas manifest in the world for the benefit of others. But the tuku system, where a child is recognized and then taken from the family to be trained, and then often to be given a lot of privilege. I think in some ways that model has caused some negative results, especially if we think, oh, that is the way to become great, to be recognized as special, and then to be specially trained. If you look at the great masters, in their life stories, they all had to face a lot of challenges. So Jigten Sumgön, age of 15, lost his father. 16, lost his mother. 17, lost his uncle, the uncle that took care of him, the uncle who is a Kempo, a senior monk in some monastery. 19, lost his sister. And the reason for all that loss is related to the area suffering famine on a regular basis. I don't really understand what famine means as an experience. I've been alive more than 50 years, not that long, but not that brief. I have never experienced hunger. not as a choice. Maybe I've experienced hunger as a choice, choosing not to eat, but I've never experienced hunger because of circumstances. So I don't really understand famine, but I can imagine, the suffering. And so Gyoba Rinpoche, father died, mother died, teacher died, uncle died, and then sister died. Famine, related to famine, because they don't directly say the biography, but often that issue of famine comes up. And so from there, we can know that at least the immediate cause of the situation. And then great poverty, right? And many obstacles and setbacks in Jigten Sumgön's life. However, through his persistent efforts, in the end, he obtained the result. Rinchen Changjuk refers to the cases of Gampopa and Milarepa as well. Gampopa had already attained great awakening in the former life, but if he had not undertaken such incomparable efforts in this life, quote, it is certain that his present activities would not have come forth. So even when, so these biographies are really interesting. On the one hand, they say, oh, Jigten Sumgön in a past life, or had already become Buddha. And then during the Buddha's lifetime, he manifested as Vimalakirti to assist Buddha Shakyamuni in Buddha Shakyamuni's teaching activities. Then later, he manifested as Nagarjuna to assist the clear presentation of the Mahayana tradition. Later, he manifested as King Rapachen, one of the Dharma kings, one of the three main Dharma kings of Tibet, Jigten Sumgön. So there's one part of his biography that emphasizes what you can call this kind of transcendent aspect of Jigten Sumgön. But on the other hand, they also talk about all the challenges that he had. Bringing these two sides together is not so easy. Words of explaining cannot exactly explain what the meaning is, but this has to come from our own experience. I have a little bit of a taste of what it means. There was a time where I looked at this and I did not accept the idea that, oh, they are already Buddhists. In my mind, it was very rigid, Either you're still a sentient being or you're a Buddha. Only two scenarios. But now a little bit, I'm getting a little bit understanding of how those two can be together. And I can say, words cannot exactly get to it, but words can give some ideas, some hints. So in the biography of Jigten Sumgön composed by Sherab Jungner, it tells about, how great, in the past life. Then before it goes into explaining, into giving the rest of Jigten Sumgön's story in this lifetime, it says, there are some that will be really caught in not understanding, wait. Because in the telling of his story, right, of the past when Jigten Sumgön was this Buddha called, let's see, the Sanskrit name would be something like Nagakula Pradipa. Nagakula Pradipa Tathagata. The Buddha known as Nagakula Pradipa. The lamp of the Naga species. The lamp, the guide of the Naga species. I mean, just a literal translation of that name. But it is said that in that lifetime, Manjushri gave forth the resolve to achieve Buddhahood. That means stable bodhicitta, bodhisattva vow in a stable way, occurred in that lifetime when Manjushri, while still at the beginning of the path, made that resolve. But later it says that both Nagakula Pradipa, the Buddha, and Manjushri is the same person. So Sherab Jungne raises that question and say, wait, how can he be simultaneously someone who is starting the path, making the Bodhisattva vow, and the Buddha that witnessed the vow? He said, even there, Sherab Jungne says, there's some kind of logical problem there. And so he says, then this logical problem of like, wait, so Jigten Sumgun underwent all those difficulties, but he was ready, Nagakula Pradipa Buddha. So Sherab Jungne is not unaware of this logical problem. But he said, you be patient, he says. You be patient, you learn. So I'm saying the same to you. You be patient, If you have to dismiss one way of looking, and just say, no, I'm not going to think about that. He's a perfect Buddha. I'm just going to take the example of how he struggled. Good. If that's how you need to work on it on that direction. I would say don't work on it so much yet on the direction of, he was already a Buddha. But keep that in the background, but focus on the difficulties. Focus on how, more importantly, not so much the difficulties, I guess I would say, but that despite the difficulties, in the midst of the difficulties, he did not give up. And so most of our difficulties, at least if you compare, situation, I would say nothing. But then, of course, these days, people talk about how trauma is trauma. You cannot compare your trauma with other people's trauma. Suffering is suffering. Yeah, that is true. But I think, if we are not skillful in handling that, then we will find an excuse to wallow in our suffering. And say, oh, my suffering, which is I wasn't able to get the bid on eBay. It's the same as the suffering of a child that is hungry, that went to bed tonight. It's, I think, a little bit nonsense, First world problems and first world people thinking about how important their suffering is. There I have to say, this is nonsense, bullshit. You have let your little suffering become an excuse for you to get stuck. So some perspective is important, Yes, I get it, Don't compare your suffering with other people's suffering. But sometimes when you compare it in a skillful way, that comparison can give you a resolve to overcome yours. That's the fundamental point. So that you skillfully, right, compare your suffering and say, my suffering is nothing compared to what these others have to go through. And so I can do it. I can get out of this. Yeah. So here, the interesting point Rinchen Changchuk gives about Gampopa's circumstances is, he says, although Gampopa had already achieved great awakening in a former lifetime, here Rinchen Changchuk says, however, if he did not work through the difficulties in his lifetime as Gampopa, then he says, it is certain that his present activities would not have come forth. So this is a very interesting point. So this is one hint, how simultaneously on the one hand, right? On the one hand, Gampopa already achieved great awakening. But here, the tendra, the interdependent origination. Remember this idea of tendra? right? Dependent origination, which is the title of this chapter, is that almost you could say, you know, from our perspective, there's these mysterious aspects of how things work that we don't see exactly, but Buddhas see thoroughly. That if Gampopa did not persist through his difficulties, then Dakpokagyu as a lineage would not have developed. His lineage would not have become what is Kagyu today. Likewise, Milarepa says, you know, because of the difficulties that he navigated, and more importantly, then, you know, how he overwhelmed, right? Back to the notion of overwhelming appearance and existence by restraint, by determination, by this unflinching commitment, whether it's difficulties or pleasures. That's another big trap. When some measure of success comes, you know, you think, oh, I'm good, you know. I think many lamas, teachers have fallen into that trap, you know. You think, oh, I'm so successful, you know. Until we are Buddha, you know, even that success can be tricky. So Gampopa did not, you know, he worked through the difficulties, and it's said because he worked through those difficulties, it had an effect on future. It has an effect on his ability to benefit others. See, we might want so much to benefit others. Now, I will confess, you know, like my role as a teacher, I think, oh, I want to benefit others. I want to benefit others. But I said, but others won't come to me. Sometimes you get a little bit jealous, you know, you look other people, oh, look, when they teach, you know, they're not even talking about anything in particular, you know, 1,000 people would listen to them, and you think, what is that? Oh, you know, on the one hand, you can say, you know, these are all suckers, you know, the 1,000 people that is listening. But on the other hand, there is the tendril that this person, the teacher who is not saying anything in particular, but 1,000 people will listen, is because probably they have cultivated the things that I mentioned here. Because Gampopa, nonetheless. So there's almost a suggestion here that, you know, if in the lifetime as Gampopa, he was just decided, you know, I've achieved great awakening, so I'm not going to go through the difficulties, then no effect of what we call Dakpo Kagyu, which is the main Kagyu that we're talking about. Then no Kagyupas. So this then brings us back to bodhicitta, you know. If we do Dharma purely for our own self, right, it doesn't need to be so complicated or difficult. It's enough, you know. Whatever you're doing is enough, just in a way. But if we're really talking about benefiting beings, then probably whatever we're doing, not enough. So that going through the difficulties, working through the challenges, for Gampopa, for Jigten Sumgön, somewhere in the back it is always because this will benefit beings. This is such a different way of viewing and relating to challenges. Yeah, we relate to challenges simply, you know, as my own stuff. Then you're always in Hinayana. Jigten Sumgön says Mahayana has to be actively cultivated as Mahayana, which is It's not enough that, incidentally what I'm doing is benefiting others. It has always to be placed clearly in the mind, that resolve. This for the benefit of others, this for the benefit of others. So even when we are faced with difficulties and challenges, we say for the benefit of others. Not just say, but actually, I'm going to work through this because, even though it seems like just my own thing, but actually this is the tendril. This is the dependent and origination that needs to be established so that my Buddha activities can unfold when the time is right. Jigten Sumgun pointed out, writes Rinchen Changchup, that people err, people make mistake if they believe that they could not become like Gampopa through their efforts. They might argue that Gampopa was a manifestation of his accomplishment of Buddhahood in a former lifetime. But if they would begin to engage as did the former masters, they would achieve the same results. But even setting aside the consideration of the former lives of these masters, in this life, one should make efforts exactly as did Gampopa. Such an effort would be similar to the Lord of Yogis Milarepa, who did not undergo complete purification in a former life, comparable to Gampopa's purification, but nevertheless attained the supreme and common siddhis through actions, quote, that were like efforts to put out a fire blazing on his head. So according to this, Gampopa as a Buddha surpassed Milarepa. So this is an example of how Milarepa said, in my lineage, the next generation is always greater than the previous generation. Even though Gampopa came to Milarepa as a disciple, on that bigger picture, it says that Gampopa, was already Buddha. But nonetheless, so those are the notes that Sobish provides for 2.8. Questions or comments?
I have a question. When we're talking about someone's becoming Buddha, the phrase is that they never return. What?
Can you, Judy, can you pause first? I'm having some problems listening to because of, I need to switch something. Yeah, hold on. So don't talk yet. Okay, now try speaking, Judy. It's my end setting. Okay, now I can hear you. Yeah.
We've read that when one becomes Buddha, the Buddha never returns. It's the idea that you've done it all and you become Buddha and you don't come back to benefit others. That's sort of put in the bodhicitta, bodhisattva.
Wait, no.
Is that,
no.
What is this never returning thing that they talk about? Or that
never returning as a confused being. That's why you want to be Buddha, so that after you are Buddha, you can spontaneously benefit beings.
Okay, I thought that.
No, you don't think that. All along I've been discrediting the idea that when you become Buddha, you become useless.
No. Well, I mean, that's actually what I've wondered about. I mean,
Yeah,
what's
no,
the point
all
of
along
becoming
I've been
Buddha if you're not
disputing
doing
that. I
anything
said,
good for anybody?
no, I've been disputing that all along.
Right. Well, that's where my confusion has been. That
No,
I,
that's a misinterpretation.
okay.
I talked about the model of the three types of bodhisattvas: the king-like, shepherd-like, and ferryman-like. Yeah, I said even though in the sutras there is discussions of the shepherd-like, that the shepherd will not rest until all under his care is safely back. So the idea of, oh, I will postpone my enlightenment until all beings are enlightened. I've said again and again that, you know, this is a misinterpretation if people think this is how it happens. This is not how it happens, but this is the motivation that you need to have. That even if somehow giving up my own enlightenment can cause others to be enlightened, I will do it as a motivation. How it happens, it's impossible that it happens that way. Because how can remaining in confusion ever benefit anyone? Never. So when Buddha uses the example of a shepherd-like bodhisattva, there he's emphasizing that given how important it is to be Buddha, ASAP, but if there is a scenario where postponing your Buddha is going to help someone else, your bodhisattva vow is so powerful that you will say, I will do it. This is an extreme example to emphasize how much the bodhisattva vow has to be genuinely about a concern for others. But it never happens that way. When Buddhahood is achieved, it is always achieved through the king-like example, the king-like bodhisattva. You know, which is, I need to achieve the state of the king so that I have complete authority and freedom to care for everyone under my care. Not enough to be a minister, not enough even to be the crown prince, has to be king. Yeah, so follow from that. Okay, now the question. Now you can modify your question.
No, I think you've told me that I have misinterpreted the never return or I mean, I don't know how to ask the question except the way I asked it. I mean, what is this expression of never returning? Is it when one becomes Buddha, you don't have
You
to
never become confused.
you don't have to be reborn, or you're not reborn.
Yeah, rebirth is a process where you have no control.
So if you become Buddha, you have control over whether or not you are reborn. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and therefore, you know, Buddhas are present.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
But present, you know, in a way that is very different from the way we are present. Yeah, very different from the way that we are present or we are reborn. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, on the one hand, you know, you cannot say Buddhas are this way or that way. But on the other hand, you also cannot say Buddhas are nothing. Therein is the paradox. Yeah, so there is, your question is there, but your confusion in one aspect needs to be dispelled before your question. So then to re-ask your question, it is this. If Buddhas never come back again in a confused way without control, then what is this Gampopa? Already Buddha, but then, he appears again. But then seemingly he's struggling. So is that struggle real or not real? That's a relevant question to ask. And then you can say, if it is not real, right? If it is not real, yeah, then it seems like, oh, that story, how do I take seriously? It's not real. He's just, going through the motions. But the paradox here is, yeah, it is not going through the motions, but it is also not in a confused way. So that's what I said, that words cannot answer. Yeah.
So
there's a way of experiencing that.
The
Yeah,
obstacles.
The other door.
The obstacle.
Go ahead and ask a question. I have to answer some need related to chickens.
So
Judy, are you asking the question?
No.
Yeah, go ahead and ask, I said.
Okay. The obstacles that Gampopa will experience as Buddha are not seen in the same way that I might, or you might, or anyone else might see the same obstacles. They see the events, they see it clearly, and so their response is very different.
No.
No?
Words cannot.
Okay. Well,
so as I said, so I already said, words cannot really get to, and I already confessed myself at one point. I said, no, I'm going to throw out that side about, oh, he was Buddha from the past. I would just focus on, that lifetime, look at the challenges that he overcome, because that's what's going to inspire me to work hard. I'm going to put aside this idea that he has been Buddha in the past, because I don't know how to bring those two together. But I said, now a little bit of that I'm starting to understand from experience. So you have to experience. I said, Sherab Jungnae himself in the biography, when he starts off Jigten Sumgön's biography, he points out all the logical problems that you're going to run into when you try to think through it. So, but why did he still, right, tell us that Jigten Sumgön in the past was this Buddha called Nagakula Pradipa? He could completely ignore that and not tell that, because the main thing he wants to tell in that biography is all the difficulties that Jigten Sumgön went through. Especially, he says, after he came to Pamodrupa, his pride is still very strong. Then after he trained with Pamodrupa, after Pamodrupa passed away, even though he has already achieved fairly advanced realizations, he was still picking fights with people. Yeah. So if Sherab Jungnae wants to just emphasize that, right, and show how Kyoba Rinpoche really worked at it, really worked at it, he could just completely not tell us at the beginning, but he tells us at the beginning. Oh, he was Nagarjuna. Oh, he was with Malakirti. Oh, he was King Rapachen. And not only that, oh, in one lifetime, he was simultaneously the Buddha that witnessed Manjushri's beginning of the path, and he was also Manjushri. So Sherab Jungnae says, look, there's all these things going on here. And then there is what we can see going on here. You cannot logically think. Try to think through. He says that, you know. He doesn't answer. He doesn't try to use words to resolve. He brings up the very issue that you're bringing up now. And he says, well, this is in my words, these are the mysterious workings of interdependence. It's not a simple kind of issue that can be solved with our words and our concepts. And the point is not even trying to solve it. I have used this on numerous occasions. I said that there are these dynamic, productive contradictions and paradoxes at the core of many of these things. And if you let it sit there and brew, and let it sit there, it can become something very fruitful. Rather than wanting to logically put this on this side and put that on this side, then you deprive yourself of this fruitful paradox, this dynamic paradox. But we have to see where we are. If that paradox, you know, like I said, myself, at one point, I just said, no, I'm going to set that aside and focus on the challenge part and overcoming the challenge and determination not to be moved by those challenges. Because to me, that is most needed in my own circumstance. Then I slightly criticize or warn about the danger of thinking in terms of, you know, oh, already perfect, already perfect.
To that point about paradox, these paradoxes, I'm curious to clarify this particular thing as paradox or not paradox or what. So basically like the bodhisattva vow, right? On the one hand, it's very difficult, right? Like
it's impossible. Not just difficult, it's impossible.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so then like all of the, like a shepherd, you know, you're willing to push everyone along before you go. And then you're willing to take on all this adversity for this cause. And so on the one hand, that's very difficult. But then on the other hand, it's like bodhicitta is instrumental and helpful. And like, I don't know, part of me feels like indispensable, like in terms of keeping trajectory. And
yes.
Yeah, I'm curious, is that like, is there a sense in which, like when we say the Mahayana, is it the case that it's better, like strictly? Like it is useful and important to have this motivation because it'll get you there better than the other way? Or is this paradox that, you know, unravels or not?
It cannot let too many secrets out. You have to experience it. secrets revealed will deprive, people from the power of discovering the answer.
I think like intellectually, the idea of being shepherd-like is pretty cold, as in like doesn't have all that much meaning. And so then
You've never been a shepherd. You've never been a parent. When you have your kids, you will understand that. Even just having God kids, I understand that. It's nothing cold about that. It keeps you up. It keeps you worrying. There's a part of your mind that is always thinking about them, even if the names are not explicitly there. So have a chat with your mom. That's the shepherd like.
Right. Yeah.
Similar, not identical, but it comes from there.
Yeah.
That's the basis to work with.
It seems like or I am, getting all balled up in concepts of time and concepts of linear progression and all of that stuff. And and concepts, what is a person named Nagarjuna and who is that? And we're losing the idea of the principle, perhaps, of Buddha to a degree.
Yes.
I mean, I can get that. I don't know beyond how to proceed, but I think I'm guilty of trying to pinpoint when that is not the point.
But it's good, to be guilty of that, because, that's how we're actually working through our understanding. Whereas the answers, might not be correct, but the process is important. The process to even recognize the confusion is important.
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
I have a few observations about Mahayana.
Yeah.
One of the things I've noticed is that when you have altruistic intention for other people, that the same action has a different meaning than when you don't have the motivation.
Yes. Exactly.
Right. So the same action, objectively, depending on your intent, can have a much different meaning. So if you go out to make money and it's for your selfish interest, that's one thing. But if you have a goal to do something else, to help someone, or to do something more altruistic, then it just seems to me that the Mahayana motivation is changing the nature of your action because of your backlying intent.
Yes.
All right. Then I have a sort of a question about the benefit of sentient beings. If we were Buddhists, we could help them to gain enlightenment, but we're not Buddhists. We're ordinary people. So my question is really our own objectives in terms of helping sentient beings. It seems to me that if you relieve suffering, that's something you can do. If you can remove confusion, not that we don't have our own confusion, we're plenty confused as it is, but if we see someone else who's confused and we're able to show them, to relieve them of the suffering from that confusion, that's something within our ability to do also.
Yes.
So, okay, well, that confirms what I was sort of thinking about. Okay, thank you.
2.9. People claim that the increase and decrease of lifespan arise by themselves, and the methods of practice have no impact on that. Right? So that, we did look at that already. Yeah. So this is related to this idea. The broader point here, the more immediate point is like, in Buddhist concepts about time and the evolution and the devolution of the universe, the universe goes through these cycles of time where lifespan is longer or shorter, right? So based on the people reading the Abhidharma and reading materials like that, some people get very stuck in the idea that, oh, we are in the degenerate times, oh, we are in the great time, then not much we can do, those circumstances will determine. But here, Jigten Sumgön rejects that limitation and says, no matter what period of time, you might think that you live in a time where people live very, very, very long. Or you might think that you live in a time where people live very, very, very short. You can change all of that skillfully or unskillfully, fruitfully or detrimentally. That all this time, the perception of time and the experience of time. So I would say, step away from the specifics given here, but the bigger point is, perceptions of time is always experienced by what? Mind. Time is a perception. There were some really interesting articles that maybe if I can find in the New Yorker a few years back. This guy who was doing some research, and not so much research. Those writers are usually, reading the latest research on whatever and then turning it, into terms that we lay people in those areas can understand. So this was about the elasticity of time and how we experience time. For example, right? We all remember that when we were 6, tomorrow is a long, long time. Now, tomorrow, my God, like that, it's gone. Yeah. So in that sense, there was more time when we were a kid and way less time now. But here what Jigten Sumgön is saying, now, if you can somehow access the 6-year-old you and that experience of time, there is more time. You can say objectively, nothing has changed 24 hours. Yeah, so Jigten Sumgön is not so much saying even, like, oh, somehow you can, the rotation of the earth and this and that can change, okay, maybe that cannot change, okay? But the way we experience time, whether increase or decrease, is a matter of perception. Don't forget that and become bound by concepts of, oh, it's a period of increase. So the equivalent would be us saying, oh, but the 7-year-old time, that's like the period of increase. Between today and tomorrow, it's a long, long time. Then you're thinking, I'm 74 now, I cannot regain that. Khyalpa Rinpoche says, wrong, you can. Likewise, you could tell the 6-year-old child, you think tomorrow is really long? Khyalpa Rinpoche says, wrong. It can be very quick. It's a matter of perception. Yeah, that's 2.9, the gist of what's been communicated there.
I think there's also a way in which, at least for me, like my sense of time is very much conditioned by like what's happening, um, like circumstances in my life. And so
Yeah.
then in the same way,
Where is what's happening?
yeah, in my mind. But I think you can even expand it from like saying when you were 7 versus now. Like you can even think, before pandemic versus now.
Oh
Like
yes, of course,
in
of
some
course. Those are
way,
just two extreme examples of very clearly, when you're 7 and when you're 74,
yeah,
how time changes as an experience. Yeah, then pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and even, like meditation this morning when we started. For some of you, God, when is this going to end? Why is this 25 minutes so long? For some other of us, it was just nothing. We all sat for the same amount of time, quote unquote, but we all sat for different times. Some of us, was in 3 kalpas. Some of us was in 3 minutes. Some of us, time was no longer relevant. That's the best one. 3 minutes, you might not be able to accomplish your bodhisattva activities. 3 kalpas, you're a miserable, suffering being. Irrelevant, good. 210 results mainly arise as the phenomena experienced in this very life. We also looked at that already, actually. And this one is to say, again, it's related to this time. As much as Buddha says, you cannot look at karma simply by what you are able to see here and now. Karma often involves things that have happened in the past and its impact will come in the future. Yes, Buddha did teach that, but at the same time, Buddha also says, at the end of the day, karma, cause and effect is something that we need to see from moment to moment how it's operating. See clearer and clearer and clearer. That's 210. 211. This is the statement we have not looked at yet. The 16 pure codes of human beings and so on, and the divine codes have the same vital point. So this is in response to people saying that the 16 pure codes of men, of human beings, and so on, are the codes of this world, and that the divine codes, meaning the Dharma codes, are different from them. So here is a general distinction, wanting to say everything about the world, even the good karma that you create in the world, this is all mundane. You need to transcend all of them. That's a very common idea today. Even many Buddhist teachers sometimes talk like this, although I'm sure they understand the deeper point, but their style of talking is more like, everything that you do in this world, even the good karma you accumulate, right? All that is based on subject and object and therefore afflicted. Sometimes you'll hear this, right? Jigten Sumgön is a teacher that is very careful about this kind of communicating, very careful about how to communicate this. And I would say that he will say, no, this is unskillful. Don't talk like this. That, for Buddhas, good and bad is no longer relevant. I would say Jigten Sumgun is someone who says, no, 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 please don't talk like that. Yes, you can quote, sutra and tantra with quotes to back up your statement like that, but please don't talk like that. Because when you talk like that, you can get yourself and others into trouble. And so here, this statement wants to emphasize, even the worldly good as embodied in the 16 pure codes for human beings, that those are in harmony with the higher code of training that the Buddha taught. Now, with the understanding that the 16 pure codes of conduct for a happy human life was also something that Buddha taught. And Buddha will not teach us, something that is detrimental to our happiness. So this is actually a point that actually wants to emphasize, almost serving as a counterbalance to the idea that, oh, the awakened state is transcendent, different completely. Yes, of course, it's different. But when that is not properly understood, then we will think, and therefore, right, somehow the worldly basis of achieving happiness and the Dharma basis of achieving true happiness are opposed. Jigten Sumgun is saying they're not opposed. They work on the same principle. It's just that if you keep the human code of the human way of achieving happiness as taught by the Buddha, those 16 codes, for example, their scope is limited. The Dharma's liberation code is expansive. So here he's saying the relationship is not so much, right, that they are moving in two different directions. No, they are moving in the same direction. The human happiness code stops too early. So that's one point. The second point is he's also making the point that the way we think how we achieve human happiness is often mistaken. That we think, we can achieve happiness by getting ahead of others. That we can achieve happiness by lying, stealing, and cheating. So here he's not just emphasizing that, right, the 16 pure human code and the Dharma code is moving in the same direction. He's also reminding us that what the world ordinarily considers to be the way to achieve success, that is actually not the way to achieve human happiness. So 2 points actually being made here. So in this commentary for this statement, the two quotes are very good. One by Nagarjuna, that says, if you practice well the system of the pure codes of human beings. So the 16, as I said, it's basically the 10 non-virtues to avoid, plus 6 further things, such as to recognize your mother as your mother, to recognize your father as your father. That means, remember their kindness and repay that kindness. Yeah, so the footnote on footnote 443 gives us the 16, the list of 16. Yeah, so here, Nagarjuna says, if you practice well the system of the pure codes of human beings, it does not take long to proceed to the God realms. If you climb the ladder of gods and human beings, liberation is near. So here Nagarjuna says, the worldly dharmas, the dharmas for worldly success that the Buddha taught is in harmony with ultimate success that the Buddha taught. So I don't know where, this idea comes from, in fact. Like, especially those teachers who teach according to wisdom, and they're very smart, with their words. Oh, they say things like, oh, it's transcendent. It's not, even, even your notion of good, you have to abandon, blah, blah, blah. And people love that, especially people living in urban areas, I think. All these sophisticated types, overly educated, love this. They slurp it up, Oh, transcending everything. Oh, Buddhahood is beyond everything. All of that, that's also where it's no coincidence, those types of Dharma communities, problems come up with the conduct of teachers and the conduct of the people in the immediate kind of inner circle of the teachers. But Nagarjuna himself, the elucidator of the wisdom tradition, himself, he doesn't talk like this. And Nagarjuna has two bodies of literature or texts. One is the most famous one, perhaps in the West again, is the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the root verses to the middle way. And there is the wisdom aspect. But in Tibet and in China and in places like that, you don't just study that side of Nagarjuna, you also study Nagarjuna's letter to a king, where he teaches these 16 pure codes of conduct. Those two are read together simultaneously. Shantideva's Guide to the Bodhisattva Way, integrates the two completely. And Shantideva has another text, even more longer, called Shiksha Samuchaya, which is the compendium of learning or practice. Samuchaya, compendium. Siksha, Sisha, how to be a disciple, how to be a trainee, how to be a practitioner. And they're laid out very clearly, the code of conduct, pure conduct of human beings, achieving human happiness, and then of bodhisattvas, more importantly. All this are always combined, So Acharya Bhava Viveka, also in this tradition, Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, Bhava Viveka, Shantideva, they all come from this wisdom lineage. So it's no coincidence that Chodrak quotes them, because Chodrak knows, the source of trouble is people misquoting the wisdom sayings that emphasize transcendence, transcendence, transcendence. So he deliberately quotes the two heroes of the wisdom tradition. The other line is the profound, so there's the profound view lineage, right? Some of you know this. And then there's the vast conduct lineage. Vast conduct lineage is through Maitreya. He's the main elucidator. And Asanga Vasubandhu. They elucidate vast conduct, meaning the practice aspect. Then Nagarjuna, right, is the profound view, the wisdom aspect. So you can see in Chodra's commentary, when he wants to address some misunderstanding based on wisdom, he would quote the heroes of the wisdom tradition to show the errors of those who misread the wisdom. Then when he wants to address or when he wants to explain Kyoba Rinpoche's statements that addresses misunderstanding in practice, in conduct, he tends to quote the heroes of the vast conduct lineage to show. So here he quotes Bhava Viveka. Wanting to climb to the top of the great mansion of absolute truth without the ladder of pure relative truth is not suitable for a learned one. So the pure relative truth in the Drigong tradition, Kyoba Rinpoche says, there is the impure relative truth or the contaminated. I prefer that word, contaminated. Pure and impure are loaded terms in English. A lot of Judeo-Christian baggage there, pure and pure. So here, I think contaminated and uncontaminated. Contaminated relative truth is the confused ideas about cause and effect. Meaning, if I cheat, I can get rich and then I can have great wealth and I can be happy. Contaminated relative truth. But if I conduct my business with honesty and integrity, I sell the things that are good and I make money the honest way. It doesn't mean naive, I see at least one person in here who is a business person. You're thinking, oh, this is not going to work. Maybe. But no, but if you sell your things, you sell your products, you sell your service, right, with integrity and with honesty, that is uncontaminated relative truth. Because you understand cause and effect. You do not lie, you do not cheat your customers. And they will be your reliable customers, rain or shine. So this is Kyoba Rinpoche's definition of contaminated relative truth and uncontaminated relative truth. And so here, Bhava Viveka says, if you want to climb to the top of the great mansion of the absolute truth, if you don't rely on the ladder of uncontaminated relative truth, then it's not going to work. Here in the notes, there is some, so to just shut up, so in the notes, this is helpful because Chodra's commentary doesn't directly talk about this, but let's look at the notes, 194, if you have the physical book. Notes to 211, he says that the Rinjangma and the Dorshema state that there are people who claim that the Buddhas of the past have rejected the activities belonging to the codes of men and entered onto a quote-unquote pure path instead. If one has to practice the Dharma from the heart, they say, and since they establish nothing but samsara, as in, even the good conduct in the world perpetuates samsara. Therefore, the codes of men must be cast into the wind. It is only the divine codes that accomplish freedom, only purely Dharma. Jigten Sumgun rejects that. Dorje Sherap's argument can be summarized as follows. When the 16 codes of conduct, 16 codes of men, or the divine codes are practiced with the wish of passing beyond samsara, they share the same vital point. So here is what I was saying earlier. The 16 pure codes for humans, what's called divine code here is Dharma code, basically. But the 16 for humans, happiness, temporary human happiness, and the Dharma for lasting happiness, is not so much that they're moving in different directions. It's that the 16 human happiness doesn't go far enough. So here, if you practice both by the wish of passing beyond samsara, then there are no contradiction. Furthermore, he states, if the human codes of conduct abandon the 4 undesirable ones and accomplish the 4 desirable ones among the 8 worldly dharmas. So here, interestingly, he uses the 8 worldly dharmas. Now, in one context, right, we talk about, these are the 8 worldly concerns. Okay? Ordinarily, we say, you should not be controlled by the 8 worldly concerns. But here he's actually saying, if the human codes of conduct abandon the 4 undesirable ones and accomplish the 4 desirable ones among the 8 dharmas, the 8 worldly concerns, and if one possesses these 16 codes of conduct, in whichever divine conduct one engages, the 4 desirable ones will appear, and likewise the 4 undesirable ones will disappear. Therefore, the human and the divine codes are one. So Sobish unpacks this, he says, ordinarily we say, yes, with the 8 worldly concerns, you want to go beyond it. But here, it also points out, but if you practice the worldly dharmas, right, if you practice the worldly dharmas, right, the human conduct that brings happiness, you can achieve the 4 of the 8 dharmas that you want, which is gain, right? Fame, praise, and pleasure. So here Jigten Sumgun is saying there is a skillful way to achieve those goals. And it's not that you should be afraid of those 4 things. The main point of being free from the 8 worldly concerns is to be dragged around by the 8 worldly concerns. The column that we desire, the column that we fear. To be dragged around by these 2. That's the meaning of to be free from the 8 worldly concerns. But in another context, with regards to the 8 worldly concerns, that column, pleasure, fame, praise, and gain, they can be very useful. If you want to connect with sentient beings, right, you want those 4 things. Right? So that's why it also says, in the broader teachings, it says, yes, you should not be dragged around by the 8 worldly concerns. But if you are wanting to benefit beings, you better watch your reputation. Don't do things that will cause people to have doubts about you. Even if you say, you know, my conscience is free. Sometimes we say that, you know, my conscience is clear. I don't care what people think. Yes, overall, that's an important point. Conscience is clear. Don't worry too much about, because some people will praise you, some people will blame you. Some people will agree with you, some people will disagree with you. Your conscience is clear. That's most important. But don't stop there. Because if you stop there, right, your own happiness can be ensured. Yes, if you stop there, your own happiness can be achieved. But then you'll be stuck in the Hinayana. If you want to practice the Mahayana, right, then it matters. There is surely something that we can do where for our own happiness, we are no longer, you know, chasing or being chased by the 8 worldly concerns. But for the welfare of others, we can also conduct ourselves in such a way that we don't cause people to have doubts about us, to not like being around us, etc., etc. Again, sometimes, you know, this more modern teachers will say, oh, don't think about all that, or things like that. And then when you look at their disciples, you know, they tend to be very arrogant. As an observation, you can see, you know, very smug, you know, like we are practicing beyond this, you know, we don't care what people think of us, you know, but it comes from privilege. So in this racial context, you know, it comes from white Dharma privilege. I don't care about what people think of me. Yeah, that's because your life has been pretty privileged, you know, you don't need to care. But if you want to connect with sentient beings, you want to draw them in for Dharma, for Bodhisattva reasons, then you got to pay more attention. So 211. Chanchu semcho rinpoche magye parnam ge gyuji ge pa nyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du bel war shu. Two quick announcements. One is a reminder that this week we will meet on Wednesday, but we will not meet on Friday, because I start another virtual retreat, a much smaller group, which is the retreat on Om Mani Padme Hum, Cultivating Love and Compassion. This is done through the Southern Dharma Retreat Center. So I think maybe registration is still open. I have no idea. You can look if you want to join. So that's that. Second announcement is I am needing help. Part of the new website that we're working on will have a robust section on these teachings that I've done in the past. And so for each of those videos of those teachings, rather than having a generic description of what that whole series is about, I would like to give people like an idea, a few lines kind of summarizing what's covered in a particular talk. Some of these talks are just single talks. But some of these talks, for example, like the Lojong series, the 16 classes, right? Each recording covers a particular section of Lojong. So if any of you can, have the interest Actually, don't do it, if you're like, it's just something I need to do. But like, oh, I would like to listen to those teachings again. If you can do that and help generate, a short description, let me know, because then I will let you know, what we have lined up. Not everything that I have done is going on to the the website. We have selected certain things, and we need brief descriptions of each of those talks. It will help people when they come to the website. If it is just a generic title, right? Again, this is Bodhisattva activities. This is one avenue. Like, you're not just listening for your own self, you're also listening with an ear towards, well, for someone who is just wanting to start, what can we say to help them go, oh yeah, I think I'll listen to this. Oh yeah, I think I'll listen to that. So if you have the time and the interest to do that, contact me. Then I will direct traffic, and then we will let you know, which talks as well. So those are the two announcements. And so y'all have a good Monday. Yeah, so send me a message if you're interested, and ta-ta.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.